There it is.
Oh,
Hi.
wait.
Oh, we're on. I think we're live now, John.
Yeah, we're live.
Hi, everybody. It's Kerry Ford welcoming you to another Q&A with John McIntosh. The title of our series is What's Really Going On? Question mark, question mark, question mark. And today's broadcast is number 17 in the series. This one's called Pain, Suffering, Victimhood. If you want to catch up and watch some of the replays from our previous broadcasts, you can catch them here at this link. And certainly if you have questions, if you're on live today and you want to put your questions in the comments to your right, you're welcome to. But if you're watching a replay, if you're watching a replay of one of the previous broadcasts, you can certainly email John at globalpeaceweb@gmail.com. And we'll try to answer your questions in a future broadcast if you like. Let's see, we're going to keep this at 55 minutes long. I'm the moderator and host, and to find out a little bit more about me, you can go to my website that I popped up at the beginning of this year before all of this madness started, voiceofdivinefeminine.com. I share some insights and some downloads that I've been receiving about the shift that we're in between paradigms. So I think most of you are familiar with John McIntosh. You can catch some of his books, you can purchase them at this link here. I think 15 of his most popular books are on that link. And I'm going to bring John on now to say a few words before we get started with the questions. So here he is.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne. Again, thank you so much for being the moderator and host of this ongoing series that we're doing, as long as we're guided to do it. I usually preface these broadcasts with a theme, and this one seems appropriate for what's going on around the world right now as things heat up and the collapsing house of cards of the patriarchy picks up speed, and there's more turmoil and conflict, confusion, chaos around the world. You could say the pain on a personal level, as well as globally, is ramping up. And pain is inevitable as long as the self, which is who you really are, self, God, consciousness, I am, one. I usually use the word self in capital letters. It's inevitable as long as the self occupies a physical body. And no matter whether you are completely aware of and experience and live as the self 24/7, as they say, clock time, you still will experience pain. The body has its own separate destiny based on past conditioning, and that will play out no matter what your state of awareness is. Suffering, however, is a different thing. When consciousness originally fell from the awareness of the God that it is, it did so as a result of an idea that the self had of separation. In order to project on the screen of consciousness, which is basically consciousness projecting on itself, the universe, it had to have the idea of separation, so that there's time and space manifesting out of that belief, and a from here to there phenomena. And out of that, the universe extrapolated into what it seems to be. It's just a dream, it's just an illusion, but it comes about initially as a result of this fall of awareness of who you really are into the belief in separation. And the belief in separation, quite naturally, if you give it a little bit of attention, generates the idea or the concept of victims, because separation tends to suggest a hierarchy of haves and have-nots. From the lowest that you can possibly imagine or you've been exposed to the highest that you can imagine or been exposed to or heard about. There seems to be a hierarchy of those that have and those that don't have. And that certainly can include the most obvious, which is, let's say, health. Someone that has terrible health, maybe they were born deformed, maybe their whole life has been a series of pains and aches and sicknesses and diseases, you know, you name it. We've all heard of this kind of thing, and maybe some of you watching either live right now or in the future, so-called future, you may have some kind of chronic illness or illnesses yourself. That's an inevitable aspect of the belief in separation, is the belief in victims. The concept of victims, therefore, is also an illusion. There are no such thing as victims. You are the self, occupying a body in a dream in order to know yourself, play and savor and taste everything that's possible within the realm of possibilities that exist within the nothingness or emptiness which the self is. And until there is a place, an environment, a scenario, the universe, the world, your body, in which to do that, you cannot experience anything. So victimhood is a manifestation of the belief in separation, tied to the concept of a hierarchy of haves and have-nots in any kind of scenario that you can imagine. This, then, is what creates suffering. Manifests suffering, doesn't create it. And suffering, then, is, I don't like what I've got. That's an understatement, depending on the severity of the pain and the experience that you're having as a so-called victim within the dream of separation. It can be extreme, and very often is, either yours or watching others. And so when one becomes aware of the self, even if it's just mental, the concept of victims then becomes a belief that is not real. But you don't experience a lack of suffering until it becomes a knowing. Whenever you are focused with any kind of belief in the mind, focused, I should say, on truth, whatever truth you've heard that feels like it's true, it's still a belief that's in the mind. And the circumstances that you have, the experiences that you have, will still continue as if you didn't know it. And so the concept of suffering continues until the awareness dawns upon the slumbering God self, as I call it, which is the self that's wrapped in conditioning in these beliefs. Until that has been dissolved and you are aware of the self as who you really are through the heart, which is really the self being aware of itself, rather than it just being a mental idea that you agree with or you believe in. Then suffering dissolves immediately. When the belief in separation dissolves as a result of knowing who you are as the self, knowing, not believing, then suffering disappears because the concept of victims also disappears. And pain will still continue, but you just simply say yes to it. And when you say yes to anything, you are diffusing it. It doesn't mean the pain isn't there, but you're diffusing the resistance, and it's the resistance that causes the suffering. So if there's no resistance, you also are not manifesting more conditioning, attachments, expectations, and identifications that can continue to bring you back into another body, which is another dream body. Reincarnation is a dream as well, but it's true within the dream. That will bring you back into another body. So when the conditioning is gone and you're not creating any more of it, the self is your ever-present moment experience, which of course is the only purpose that you have in a body until it occurs. And then you can stay or not stay depending on what you're pulled to do. So that's what I wanted to speak about now, because certainly many on the planet are experiencing a spike in pain, agony, chaos, conflict, confusion, and suffering. and hopefully that will be of some assistance to some of you.
So I'm going to start with a question from Layla, who says, my forgetfulness continues and it's scaring me. I just asked, who is it that is scared? Last week, I was driving on the road, freeway I've been driving on for years. All of a sudden, I forgot the whole road. The signs weren't even there or didn't make sense, and I kind of didn't even know how to drive. Very, very uncomfortable feeling, and it lasted for a long time. Today, for a chunk of time, I totally forgot I had a daughter. I don't even know how to explain it. All of a sudden, she came to my mind and memory. All this time, I was downstairs and she was upstairs. I know the dream world is falling apart, but it's freaking me out. Please comment.
Okay, that for some will sound incredibly bizarre. I can assure you it's absolutely normal when you are making the shift, especially if you're making it quickly, and quickly might be over a lifetime. It could be, you know, decades, but more than likely that quickly is accelerating very, very fast right now because of the opportunity that exists to shift from dreaming into complete awareness. That opportunity exists right now in the so-called clock time phase that we're in what I call the great shift out of the patriarchy into the temporary age of light, a couple of thousand years. When one has made a conscious choice to be free, and I always emphasize in capital letters, no matter what, no exceptions at all. And this doesn't mean that you give up everything. It means that you're willing to give up everything if you're called upon to do so. And that might mean giving up nothing. In most cases, it means giving up something. In my case, it did mean giving up everything. But that's rare. When you've made that choice, and it's sincere, and you're humbly following it persistently, consistently, diligently, authentically, transparently, every moment of every day, no matter what's going on, it's your priority. Then you are probably working with either self-inquiry or surrender, which is the last so-called practice, pathless path that all practices, all disciplines dovetail into eventually. You're practicing one or the other, ideally both. For me, it was surrender. But self-inquiry is just simply who is it, that, as she said, who is it that is experiencing this lack of awareness of where I am when she was on the highway. And then the answer is me, and then the question is, who am I? That's self-inquiry. It is too simple for many. It's unbelievable that it can have the effect that it has. But what it does is it allows grace, love in action, which is who you are. Love is another word for the self, to shine light on that layer of conditioning and to burn it away, to dissolve it. Then in all probability, what's happening, if you can sort of correlate that to the dream as something that's not real, the dream becomes shaky. And it's like a movie. You can be watching a movie, and let's say that the movie is a copy. If you remember the old cassette tapes that you'd, it's not that long ago. I think most of you probably remember going to Blockbuster and renting a cassette tape. Well, some of those tapes, after a lot of use, would get choppy. They'd be, you know, not functioning correctly. The magnetism or whatever makes it work within it might be broken, and there could be breaks in the movie as you were watching it because it was, let's say, an old tape. This is very much like that. You're going down the road highway, as she said, that she's gone down many times before. She knows it very well. She knows the signs. Probably you could almost say she could do it in her sleep, which is exactly what's happening in reality, non-reality reality. And all of a sudden, she doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know what the highway is. She hasn't a clue. And it can last for some time. Now, I should say as a sidebar that the self is basically driving the car then. And you may be very tend to be very frightened that, oh my God, what's happening to me? I should drive over to the side of the road because I could have an accident. You're safer than you've ever been. The self is in control, and I assure you, it knows how to drive a car, knows how to do everything. It can, it built the universal dream. It can drive a car. And that's what it's doing in that moment. So it doesn't matter if she's sitting in a different room and her daughter's in another room and she completely forgets, maybe she's even in her own house and forgets that she has a daughter. That would seem safer if driving a car down a freeway, may not. There is no fear when the self is in complete control. That's what surrender is totally giving up the idea that a personal individual self, what I call the false self or body, mind, identity, has any control of anything. It messes up totally everything, no matter how well it goes. It's messing it up. When the self is given the control, what I call allowing life to live itself, live you, capital letters, you meaning the self, everything flows perfectly. That doesn't mean you don't have pain. It doesn't mean that you have painful circumstances. It just means that everything is flowing seamlessly, perfectly, because the self is in control. It's always in control anyway. And I'll give you an example. The mind, in its proper state, is the servant to the heart. The heart is another word for the self. It's not the physical heart. The heart is just another name for the self, capital letters. And when the self is in control, which it is anyway, of the body, which it is mostly for everyone, thousands, as you sit there watching, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of activities, of actions are happening. You're not aware that hormones are being created, or enzymes are being created, or cells are being grown and cells are being destroyed. You're not aware of the multitude of functions that are going on, even just the process of breathing without thinking about it. You certainly can breathe with thought, but most breathing just takes place. And all of this is orchestrated, perfectly orchestrated by the self, provided you don't get in the way. The so-called you, as this false self, gets in the way. Your condition gets in the way. And this is why you have anomalies in the body. It may appear that you caught a cold, let's say, or that you contracted a disease, some contagious disease, or you had an accident. But all of these things are as a result of the attempt of the false self to take over control of circumstances in their so-called life, and interfering with the natural control that the self has. So when the self is given, you open, in other words, you completely open up to the self running the show completely. Then everything falls into place perfectly, and there will be, and there are, it depends on the person, not a person really, but we'll say it depends on the person. There are often moments where they will experience pockets where everything that they once thought they knew, dissolves, just disappears. And these pockets can last for minutes, hours, even days, sometimes even weeks for some. Some will call that samadhi. It's another way of talking about samadhi, where everything just disappears. This is a moment of truth, literally, a moment of reality. In my case, I never experienced anything like that. It was everything segued seamlessly out of the dream and into the truth. But there are many that do have these bombastic events that can be very scary. But rest assured, the self is running the show, and everything is okay and will work out exactly the way it's supposed to. So fear not.
I'm going to continue with another question from Layla. She says, 3 beautiful children came to this grand dream physically through me giving birth. Of course, I love them so much. I understand that they need to follow their own pathless path to wake up to who they are. But can how I talk and live as a truth affect their real freedom?
Okay, this is an extremely important and very, very good question. The master or sage Ramana talked about this often. And as I said just a few moments ago, your only purpose in being here until it happens is your freedom, what I call freedom or self-realization, the awareness of the God that you are. Everything else is second place. And he was asked about this many times, and I'm asked about it frequently, that what can you do, what should you do in the world in order to help the world? Well, I don't know what the population of the world is now, 7.8 billion people. If they were all focused in a well-meaning way on helping to, as they would call it, save the world and everything that's in it, all of them focused, this moment, if that happened, they would not have the same influence that one self-realized individual has. Because the light of truth shines the illusion away. When you're not in truth, you're trying to fix the illusion. And there are many activists that are trying to fix the planet, fix society, fix politics, fix this, fix that. Very well-meaning, very heart-centered, motivated by the best of intentions, very altruistic. But if there is conditioning filtering the intention, then the effects that occur from this motivation are always going to be tainted. It's inevitable. The clear heart that recognizes the illusion or the dream for what it is shines the light purely. And its influence, without effort, without intention, just simply as you've heard many times, I'm sure, the concept of beingness, just being, has an enormous influence. And I often refer to those that are free, that are still in a body, as lighthouses that shine without effort, without intention. They just shine naturally through their beingness, light into the dream. So, to answer her question, just being free has an enormous influence on the freedom of the children. It doesn't matter if they get it. And very often you'll find that, as Jesus said, a prophet has no honor in his own home. The children will be combative, rebellious. They don't want to know. But the influence is enormous. And the seed planting that goes on, you could say, that may not take even effect for many lifetimes, but let's say, after they've gone through whatever they need to go through in their predestiny, will have an enormous effect and will bear fruit not from your doing anything, because beingness is not a doing. It's just a being. The light just is. It's not doing anything. It just is the light of truth. So that light of truth will then have an influence. It's not that something becomes as a result of it. It's that the awareness becomes aware of what already exists, which is the light of truth. So rest assured, when you are free, even if you're close to free, and still have some whispers, which I have, some few whispers, then the influence that you have is enormous. You don't have to do anything. You certainly don't have to be broadcasting as I am, but I'm pulled to do that, and so I'm doing it. The influence of just being, of doing nothing, literally, has an enormous influence. So yes, for sure, in her case.
Well, I'm just going to finish Layla's with third question. There are many thoughts and inside conversations. Are the thoughts coming up due to conditioning? I feel that I need to use self-inquiry for every single one to be released. Would you please shine light on this?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked those three questions in a row, because they're all relative. Part of my head is not there, so I'm fixing my head. The concept of thoughts, which you could call the result of conditioning, are, you know, like a parade across the stage. Now, the closer you get to the total awareness of your freedom or self-realization, the fewer actors walk across the stage. The actors are those that portray the conditioning that is manifesting as a result of them. And there'll be fewer and fewer and fewer. So they are, yes, coming from conditioning. However, self-inquiry, I'll put it this way, only needs to be applied to those thoughts which trigger you. So let's say there's a dozen actors on the stage, a dozen thoughts on the stage, and they may be repetitive thoughts. You know, they could come and go, but they're the same 12 actors on the stage, and only one of them stands out. You know, this one's got a really odd costume, and it gets your attention, and then you're focused on it like you're in a theater. So the one that you're triggered by, 2 or 3 you're triggered by, whatever, that's the one, or those are the ones that you place your attention on with regard to the use of self-inquiry. It isn't necessary for you to, you know, have a laundry list of thoughts that, oh, gee, I've got to get to that one. I've got to remember these thoughts so I can get back to them and do self-inquiry. No, whatever triggers you, that is what you place your attention on insofar as the usefulness of self-inquiry, and it will dissolve that particular actor on the stage.
I have a quick question about what you just said. When you say trigger you, do you mean get an emotional response, whether it's positive or negative, so to speak?
Yeah, you can call it emotions if you want. The emotions are the instruments, the soldiers of the mind, the general. And so it can feel like an emotional response, possibly a very strong emotional response. And it really doesn't need to be gone into more than that. Let's just say that it's unmistakable. You can't miss it. You know, like if there were 12 actors on the stage and one of them had a, you know, a bright red costume with flashing lights, most would focus on that one first. They would see it first. They'd be triggered by the flashing lights and the red costume. And it might be something like rage. Perhaps there was a lot of rage going around, and that's a layer of conditioning that needs to be looked at that moment. Then it's unmistakable. So we can call it emotion. It's actually subtler than that, but it doesn't matter. It got your attention, and that's the most important thing. It got your attention.
So that's the meter for it. Is how much.
That's the meter. That's the monitor. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's like that. You can't miss it. You can ignore it, but you can't miss it. And everybody can relate to that on a daily basis. You know, many things get your attention, and literally they can literally turn your head, and that's something to look at then, if you choose. That's the key. If you choose.
Thank you. I'm going to continue with a question from Loney. If self-inquiry is the quickest way home, why is it necessary to meditate and do breath work? Or should we combine all of these for even better results?
Well, the word necessary is what comes up in that question. Is it necessary to meditate? Absolutely not. Is it necessary to do breath work, or pranayama, you might call it? Absolutely not. Does it bring you joy to do either or both of those? Then absolutely. If it's joyful, whatever is joyful is definitely for you in the moment. Will it bring you to your freedom? Absolutely not. Will it bring you a moment of, or a moment can be, you know, many hours in clock time of freedom? Absolutely. The possibility of using breath work or using meditation to experience the self for a moment, and as I say, a moment can be literally just a second, or it can be hours, is definitely possible through meditation and or breath work. However, when you stop the practice, within a very short period, you go back into the condition based on your conditioning of the body-mind identity that you had. It does not dissolve the body-mind identity. That has to be so-called done through self-inquiry or surrender. Meditation and breath work is very close to surrender. It's you could say it's a sibling of surrender. You could say that it's an actual activity of surrender. But surrender is the title. And the subheadings could be, oh, I'm drawn to do yoga. And in the yoga, I do breath work. And in the yoga, I do meditation. And I've been doing it for years and I love it. And it works. Yes, it does. But it does not bring you to permanent, seamless, unbroken freedom. What it can do, however, and what it does do for anyone that's dedicated to it and loves it, you know, you can't expect to get anything from it if you're doing it because you're expecting results. That's definitely not a reason for doing any kind of practice. But if you're doing it because you love it, because you feel a sense of joy doing it, then what it does is it brings you or it improves one-pointedness. And one-pointedness is like the ability to focus, perhaps you could say, on one thing at a time, one thought at a time. Or even on nothingness. And this one-pointedness then is enormously useful in self-inquiry surrender. So does it have a so-called result? As long as you're not looking for a result, that's key. Yes, it does. It brings one-pointedness. Does it have a temporary result? Possibly. Of experiencing the self? Absolutely. Does it bring you to seamless, unbroken, self-realized freedom? No. So hopefully that explains that.
I'm going to insert a question by Sophie that just popped up in the comments. Sophie wants to know, with self-inquiry, is it still useful minutes or hours later when we realized we didn't use it in a triggered moment or situation?
You, please read that again. That was a little confusing.
Okay. With self-inquiry, is it still useful minutes or hours later when we realize we didn't use it in a triggered moment or situation?
Okay. That's a very good question, because let's say something triggered you, but maybe you're in, let's say you're a teacher and you're in a classroom and you're teaching your students, and your attention needs to be on your students. You could be a nurse, you could be a surgeon, you know, and you're operating on someone. Not a good time to lose your attention. But you might have been triggered by something that was occurring in the operating theater, in the classroom, or whatever. And it probably will come back to your recall sometime later. Perhaps you're home, you're relaxing, whatever, by yourself, whatever. Could be you're driving your car, you're walking down the street, whatever, and it comes back to you. Then yes, definitely use self-inquiry on that triggered moment. But certainly, if you're involved in something, you know, that, let's say, is quite important in the moment, then rest assured the self that you are will remind the slumbering God self that it is, that you are, who's being triggered. The false self is not triggered. The false self doesn't exist. The slumbering God self that's wrapped in the conditioning of the false self, it's triggered, and it will be reminded of that trigger. And then you go ahead and do that self-inquiry on that moment.
I'm going to go to a question by Anonymous, who says, on this karma thing, this man I know says that we're all... Oh, I see. This man I know says that we are all 5th through 9th density beings living in a state of bliss here. Wars were going on elsewhere. Planets were being destroyed by dark forces. Those dark forces came here and caused the fall. The fall refers to a fall in a vibrational frequency. And that, yes, we're on the karmic wheel, so to speak, but we didn't put ourselves on it. And it's part of the trap. In fact, it's a huge part of the trap, in that we just go and incarnate again and again to relieve some of the karmic debt. He also says that the Greys, Draco, and reptilians are keeping us trapped in the loop so that we can't ascend. What do you say about this?
Okay. Some of you will be familiar with this kind of talk of dimensions and beings from other planets and dark forces that have been controlling humankind and so on. And some of you may find this is absolutely new and it sounds very bizarre. Let's just start at point zero, which is this universe is a dream. And I say this often, and I will continue to be a broken record on this. This is a dream. And for you, let me reiterate something I've said in other broadcasts. Right now, you're sitting perhaps in a room where your computer is, or maybe you've got this projected on a flat screen through your computer, and maybe you're sitting in a living room. And peripherally, you can see from side to side, and you can see around furniture, pots, plants, tables, coffee cups, rugs, the screen, and me projected on the screen. That's your universe. That's it. There is no more. If you think about, let's say, going shopping after you watch this, that is a memory of a shopping center, shopping plaza, shopping store. It's a memory. It does not exist except in your memory. Your universe, your world, your experience in total, no matter how big your memory is of the universe based on your archive of learned facts, learned information, is not happening. What's happening is what you are experiencing in this moment. That's your universe. So for that person that spoke to the questioner and said, this is how it works, that's their universe. And it's not even their universe. It's their remembered universe based on facts and information that they believe. That's their reality, as they call it. It's just a dream, but that's their reality. That's one version of how things work. And it's a version that involves, as you would expect, time and space. Well, the fact is, when you go to sleep and you're not dreaming, you're in what's called deep sleep, where you're not dreaming. You're not awake. You're not asleep dreaming. You're in deep sleep. Everything disappears. There's no universe. It's gone. And when you then wake up, if someone shook you awake that moment, it would take you a moment before things started to come into focus, and you remembered, oh, this is my bedroom, and there's my wife or husband who just shook me awake for whatever reason. Slept in and breakfast is ready or something like that. That's your reality. That's your only reality in that moment. You could be thinking about, gee, I've got to get to the office. I slept in. That's a memory. It's a memory of something which does not exist. The experience that you're having in the moment is also non-existent. It's not real. It's a dream. But it is the experience that you're having, which is the most real, more so than a memory of facts learned or ideas that are in your archive of belief systems, such as this fellow or person that mentioned we're third to ninth dimensional or 900 dimensions, doesn't matter. And, we came from reptiles and they're controlling. This is just an idea. There are many other ideas that are equally as believable or non-believable for how we got here. The simplicity is what I spoke about earlier. The self wanted to know itself. And so it had an idea of separation. And from separation came time and space. And from time and space and the belief in separation came the projection of the universe on the screen of consciousness. And from that, the universe unfolded. But it didn't. It's all happening in the moment. It's all instantaneous. There is no evolution over billions of years like we've heard. That's just a belief. It's a dream. It's not real. Now, this is very, very hard to even believe, let alone shift into the knowingness of it. But if you can just toy with the idea that you are God, you are one, and you forgot. And if there's any one, if we can call it one, if there's anyone that can convince itself that it's not God, it's God. You have convinced yourself that you're not who you are. And all these things that you hear about, all these ideas of evolution, or whatever the Darwinian focus was, or beings from other planets, they're dreams as well. All of them are dreams. Your body, and the body you're looking at right now, is a dream. The words, the sound that's coming out of the body, which is not, because the body's not there, it's just on the screen, is a dream. The only thing that's real is the consciousness, the self, that is animating, not inside. The body, the screen, the room that you're in, the body that you seem to be in, all of it is inside the self, projected on the screen of consciousness. So whatever you hear, if it resonates with you, play with it. Knock yourself out. Have fun with it. But the only truth is, you're the self. You wanted to know yourself. You created the universe. You manifested the universe out of the belief in separation. And out of that came conditioning and the body-mind identity. And all of it is just a dream, allowing you as the self, as the God that you are, same as me. I'm the same as you. There's no difference. You and I are one. Not metaphorically. There is only one here. And it's all happening as a dream, as an illusion. So, whatever the story is that you hear from somebody, enjoy it, but know that it's not true. None of it's true. None of it's true. The only thing that's true is what's imperishable, and the self is imperishable. It doesn't change, and it's empty, and all the rest of it is just a projection.
Well, Kim just inserted a question in the comments. She says, I'd like to ask, who told you, John, to do these broadcasts?
Okay, first of all, there is no John. John is made up. I have a license, I have a passport, and I've got credit cards, and I have an address, I have a telephone number, and they all have John McIntosh connected to them. But there is no John McIntosh, because the conditioning, expectations, attachments, and identifications tied to memory and imagination. Memory is the past, imagination is the future. That is wrapped around the self and then believed in. And that creates the illusion of a body-mind identity called a person with a name called John McIntosh. So John McIntosh is not told anything. He doesn't exist. The body left behind when the identity dies, and that's the only thing that dies. Death is just the body falls away, but the self never dies. The real you never dies. The identity dies. So the identity is not here. There is no John McIntosh. So to get to the who, well, who would be telling who is the real question. The self is speaking to itself. I am the self. So are you. I'm simply aware of the self always. There's no big deal about this, ascension and Christ consciousness and all the buzzers and whistles and fireworks that go off associated with this. It's not a big deal. It's a huge deal if you're not aware of it. But it's not a big deal. There's just one. And most of one is sleeping. I'm not. And so the self informs the self. It has, you could say, a presence within this body, a receptive presence, which is the mind. But the mind is a servant. It's not the tyrant that's in charge of the so-called person that is a slave to the conditioning. That is the case with most of humanity. So the mind has taken its proper position in this body as a servant, so that the body is operated like an operating system in a computer. It's operated by the mind, but influenced by the self. So it's self-maintaining. And this self is communicating with itself as the director, you could say, of the mind, sitting on the throne, you could say, which is what the picture when you see a Buddha with that little bubble on the head, which is the 1,000-petaled lotus, sitting in a serene posture. That is a fully awakened self occupying a body. So it's the self is speaking to the self. And I like to use the word, because I'm using words, it's always confining. I like to use the word or phrase, I am or I was pulled to write. I write articles every day, post articles every day, and I do this broadcast for the last 17 weeks because I was pulled to do it. If the pull stopped, I would instantly stop without the slightest hesitation. But that's what has come from the self to the self in this particular instrument. And so the manifestation of it is this broadcast. For whatever reason, I don't need to know the reason. I'm not attached to it because there is no I to be attached to anything. I don't know if that answers it, but that's the truth.
Not only did you answer it, but you answered a follow-up question that you didn't even see that says, why do you do these broadcasts? So we had a complete circle there. That was.
Oh, yeah, right.
I have a question from Anonymous. All desire for many things and experiences have been fading over the last year. The I that I call me is now living a boring life, so much so that even living seems to have no purpose other than to be in this world for my family. My wife is religious and not awakened, so I cannot share anything of truth with her as she is persuaded that she has the truth. I long for the realization of what I know mentally. I'm not sure I know anything from the heart. I've gone from believing, not knowing, to doubting, thinking I will be coming back for more lifetimes.
This is a really, really important question. When one has made, and I'm assuming that this person has made remembering they're not a person, the no matter what choice to be free, and they're standing in the fire of who I am not, which is standing in the fire of the conditioning, which they're constantly being triggered by, because you've opened up to burning away the conditioning so that the clouds that they are, that hide the sun that you are as the self, can dissolve, and you become aware that the sun is who you are. That's basically what happens with enormous so-called clock time speed when you've made this choice. Not hundreds of lifetimes, even hundreds of days, and in some cases hundreds of minutes for a handful over so-called history. But certainly very, very quickly, and in this lifetime, there will come, as a result, doubts. And if I could use the analogy of Jesus after he was baptized, it doesn't matter if you believe any of this, it's a great story by John the Baptist, and then for so-called 40 days and 40 nights. It seems like everything happened in 40 days and 40 nights in the Bible. I'm sure there's some numerological explanation for it, but it doesn't matter. He's in a cave and he's wrestling with the devil, or wrestling with Satan. Well, the only Satan that exists is conditioning. This false self is the only Satan there is, which is the non-self. Call it whatever you want. Call it Lucifer, call it Satan, or any of the hundreds of so-called names that the so-called evil has. There is only God, so it's all happening within the one God that you are. There's going to be a wrestling occurring when you have been, let's say, baptized in the fire of your choice to be free. That's what baptism is. You've given your life over to the truth, and you said, you take care of things. And then all hell breaks loose because conditioning is now recognizing that it's been discovered. The false self has been revealed. And that's why it backs off when light is shone on it, back into the self from whence it came, through the belief in separation. It withdraws when light is shone on it. And so there is a wrestling, a constant wrestling that goes on. And this means moments of self-doubt are going to come and go. Not caring whether you're here. I hear this a lot from a handful of those that are free that I associate with closely. The concept of boring, that might be the word that's using, but it's an indifference to the dream. Because if you're not attracted to, if you're not attached to, if you don't have expectations from, if you're not identifying with the dream, then very little that used to turn you on, so-called, is going to turn you on anymore. And so there can be this wondering, and frequently, what the hell am I doing here? Well, if you're here and if you're free, then you are at the very least in a state of beingness. And that beingness, as I said earlier in the broadcast, is shining a light without your having to do anything on the entire planet, on the entire dream. It's shining the light on anything that you've ever been exposed to. And it is therefore burning away conditioning, collective conditioning, and other aspects of the slumbering God self that seem to be separate from you, but they're not. You don't have to do anything. It's just happening. Nevertheless, I can assure you that when you're in this position, your ability to savor the dream, such as a sunset, a flower, an aroma, a peaceful moment, a songbird, the love of an animal, or ideally the love of another free one, which is totally different. It's the real unconditioned love is almost, without exception, very, very rare. Because if you have conditioning, obviously your love is conditioned. But the love of unconditional love is exquisitely sublime. So those moments are accentuated when you're free. But the feeling of, to use her words, being bored it can come very often. What the hell am I doing here? It's part of the standing in the fire of who you're not. And you just say yes to it. And if it's difficult to say yes to it, if you might even be pissed off and say, oh, damn it, when is this going to end? Then say yes to the no. Just say yes. You can be angry and frustrated and irritated. Just say yes to it. Because resistance just expands what you don't want. If I could just take a second to talk about this in terms of the dream world, people wonder why I've learned all this stuff about motivation and creation and manifestation and everything, and I wonder why I haven't attained. Well, it's very simple. You're placing attention on what you don't want more than what you want. It's a dream, this manifestation business, but I can assure you, as one that accomplished all of it and rose to the top, this is all it is. Place your attention on what you want, and if you want to dream, then go ahead and dream. And if your dreams are, I want to be rich and famous and all, then go ahead and do that. It's all right. Eventually, you come to the point where you're sufficiently satiated with it and you want to be free. But if you want to be successful in the dream, it's unbelievably easy. Just focus on what you want and don't divert from it and be passionate. And it'll happen. Absolutely, it'll happen. And then finally, you'll get frustrated with it and let it go too. But there's just no right or wrong. That's for sure. I got a little bit off topic, but hopefully I answered the question in there as well.
No, that was great. Going to sneak in one last question from George. Can you explain how surrender looks? It's hard for me to know how much to accept, absorb, and when and how to express my anger when I'm triggered constantly and get stressed and angry. Should I accept all that comes to me? Is this surrender?
Yeah, that is also a wonderful question. There are no exceptions when you surrender. You say yes to everything. Okay, so now I'll tell you what I would do if I was to be in the presence of, let's say, a child that's being abused. I don't care if it's a parent or a bully or whatever it is. If I was there, then I'm definitely there in part to intervene. I wouldn't be there otherwise as the self. Would I intervene? Absolutely, I would intervene. What would I do? I have no idea because I don't plan. There's no agendas. There's no have-tos. There's no rules. There's no bullet points that say this is what you do in these circumstances. In the moment, you, the real you, is always guided precisely for that precise circumstance, what to do, what to say, who to say it to, and how to say it, or how to do it, or not do it. And very often it's just your presence and not doing anything. Would I be attached to the situation? Absolutely not. Would I have compassion for the child and the perpetrator? Absolutely. Would I judge anything that's going on? Absolutely not. Because I know it's all a dream. But it doesn't mean that those that are dreaming, and there are no others, are not suffering. So would I have compassion for them? Absolutely. I know that their suffering is occurring because of their belief system, and because I'm not dreaming and I'm free, of course I would love them. I would express love by expressing compassion in whatever way I was guided to in that moment. There's also no bullet points or no brochure that comes with how you express compassion. It might be just standing there and not saying anything, but in your heart, you're feeling an expression of, let's say, wrapping them in your arms, that sort of thing. It can be many, many different scenarios. So seems like it's off topic, but it isn't. If this individual happens to have a lot of anger conditioning and it comes up frequently, what do? You say yes to it. You don't act out. Never do you act out. Now, you might end up in an outburst, and you might act out. And you don't beat yourself up. You don't castigate yourself. You don't judge. You don't indulge in shame, which is definitely there. Remorse, definitely there. You don't indulge in that. You just say yes to it. It doesn't mean you agree with it. But the non-resistance of your yes diffuses the conditioning, which is the same thing as dissolving it. And it doesn't create more of it. Use the word karma if you like. It diffuses the karma and it doesn't create more of it. I don't use the word karma because there's so many connotations connected to it. So always, no exceptions. Surrender is total in every circumstance. Doesn't mean you agree with it. And it doesn't mean that even you want to say yes, but you say yes to the no then. And surrender, which is also love in action, shines light on the conditioning and dissolves it. Hopefully that helps.
I think we've come to the end of our time together today. So we will be here next week if you want to join us at the same time.
Right. Thank you so much for being with us, some of you for 17 weeks. And remember, send your questions into this address, and we'll try to include them as they come up. And once again, thank you to Anne for being the, what did they used to say? Was it the 50s or 60s? The hostess with the mostest? Was that the expression? You are in show business, so you probably know that. Anyway, very grateful to have Anne orchestrating all the bits and pieces. So thank you, everyone, for being with us, and I'll see if I can get this right. I always have trouble finding it on the camera. There we go. Yeah. Lots of love. Bye for now.
Bye.